What if the most celebrated revolution in history wasn't a revolution at all? What if we, the people, never actually meant you? What if the men who wrote "all men are created equal" owned hundreds of human beings and never saw the contradiction? The American Revolution, the birth of freedom, the triumph of the common man over tyranny. That's the story anyway. This is Shadow States, and tonight we're following the money all the way back to 1776. Welcome to Myths We Live By, Deconstructing American Mythology. Today's episode, the American Revolution myth, Rich Men's Tax Rebellion. Close your eyes. Picture the American Revolution. What do you see? Ragged farmers picking up muskets, brave colonists dumping tea into Boston Harbor, George Washington crossing the Delaware with nothing but courage and destiny, a scrappy underdog nation defeating the greatest empire on earth for one reason: freedom. It's a beautiful story. It's in every textbook, every 4th of July speech, every movie. But here's what they don't tell you. The revolution wasn't led by farmers, it was led by the richest men in the colonies. They weren't fighting for your freedom, they were fighting to protect their fortunes. And the system they built afterward, it was designed to keep power exactly where it started, in their hands. Let's pull back the curtain. Let's meet the common men who led this people's revolution. George Washington, one of the largest landowners in Virginia. At his death, he owned 50,000 acres and over 300 enslaved people. Net worth in today's dollars, over $500 million. Benjamin Franklin, wealthy publisher, diplomat, lived in luxury in Paris while negotiating treaties, also a slaveholder. John Hancock, the richest merchant in New England. His fortune came largely from smuggling to avoid British taxes. No wonder he signed so large. Thomas Jefferson owned over 600 enslaved people in his lifetime, wrote "all men are created equal" while people he owned served his dinner. These weren't desperate farmers, they were the colonial 1%. The Continental Congress, filled with lawyers, merchants, plantation owners, and land speculators. The foot soldiers, yes, many were poor, but they weren't making decisions, they were doing the dying. The men who designed the revolution, wrote its documents, and shaped the new government were the wealthiest men in America. No taxation without representation. Sounds like a principle, a cry for democracy. Let's look closer. After the French and Indian War, Britain was broke. They'd spent a fortune defending the colonies, so Parliament passed the Stamp Act, a tax on paper goods, legal documents, and newspapers. Who was hit hardest? Lawyers, merchants, printers, publishers, the colonial elite. The poor farmer in rural Virginia, he barely used stamped paper. The wealthy lawyer in Boston, he used it every day. The men screaming loudest about tyranny were the men whose profits were being cut. And here's the real irony. When these same men created the new American government, did they give representation to everyone they taxed? Let's see. Women? Taxed, no vote. Enslaved people? Property, no vote. Poor white men without land? Taxed, no vote in most states. Native Americans? Their land was taken, no vote. The founders didn't oppose taxation without representation. They opposed their taxation without their representation. Once they were in charge, they were perfectly happy to tax people who couldn't vote. If you've watched our episode, America is no longer a democracy, the oligarchy exposed, you already see this pattern. A government designed by the wealthy, for the wealthy, dressed up as the people. The revolution ends, America wins. Now what? The Articles of Confederation gave too much power to the states. The wealthy elite couldn't control the whole country, so they called a constitutional convention, in secret, behind closed doors, with armed guards outside. Who attended? Lawyers, bankers, slaveholders, land speculators. Not a single farmer, not a single craftsman, not a single woman or enslaved person. And what did they build? A Senate where states, not people, got equal votes. An electoral college to filter the popular will. A president with veto power over Congress. Judges appointed for life. And enslaved people? Counted as 3/5 of a person for representation, not for rights. James Madison, the father of the Constitution, wrote in Federalist No. 10 that government must protect the minority of the opulent from the majority. Read that again. Protect the wealthy minority from the majority. That's not democracy. That's oligarchy with a better marketing department.
The Constitution wasn't designed to give you power. It was designed to make you feel like you had power while keeping it safely in the hands of people like the founders. If the revolution wasn't for the people, who did benefit? Land speculators. Before the revolution, Britain's proclamation of 1763 banned settlers from moving west of the Appalachians. Men like Washington and Franklin had invested heavily in western land. After the revolution, that restriction was gone. Native nations were pushed out. Speculators made fortunes. Merchants and smugglers. British trade laws limited colonial commerce. Wealthy merchants like John Hancock were essentially smugglers. After the revolution, they became legitimate businessmen. Their fortunes were now legal. Slaveholders. Britain was moving towards abolition. By breaking away, Southern slaveholders guaranteed that no outside power could interfere with their peculiar institution. The revolution didn't free the slaves, it protected the slaveholders. If you've seen The Dark Truth About the First Thanksgiving, It Wasn't a Feast, you know this is a recurring theme: American freedom built on someone else's destruction. So why do we keep telling the fairy tale version? Because myths are useful. If the revolution was a people's uprising, then America is inherently democratic, and any criticism of the system is an attack on freedom itself. If the founders were saints, then the system they built must be sacred. If 1776 was about liberty for all, then inequality today is just a bug,
Not a feature. But if you see the revolution for what it was, a transfer of power from a British elite to an American elite, suddenly the whole story changes. Suddenly, the Constitution looks less like scripture and more like a contract written by rich men to protect rich men. The founders didn't fail to create equality, they never intended to. So is the American Revolution worthless? Was it all a lie? Not exactly. The ideas of 1776, liberty, equality, self-governance, are powerful, but those ideas were written by men who didn't believe they applied to everyone. The real revolution, the one that actually expanded freedom, came later, in the abolitionist movement, the labor movement, the suffragettes, the civil rights movement. Every expansion of real liberty came from people fighting against the system the founders built, not because of it. 1776 was the beginning of a promise, but someone else had to keep it. If you want to understand how this founding bargain still shapes America today, watch America Is No Longer a Democracy, The Oligarchy Exposed, to see how the wealthy still write the rules. And for another beloved myth pulled apart, watch The Dark Truth About the First Thanksgiving, It Wasn't a Feast, to see how far the gap goes between American mythology and reality. This is Shadow States. Subscribe. Check out the playlist Myths We Live By, Deconstructing American Mythology. The founders wrote a beautiful story. They just forgot to include you in it.